Hi, my name's Katherine Lazenby and I'm a People Participation Worker for Disordered Eating. So I first got involved with ELFT's transformation programme as a service user representative through People Participation. This was back in around December, I think, 2019. And initially for many, many months I was just involved drawing on my own lived experience, specifically around eating disorders. So it was the eating disorder pathway development part of the transformation programme. And then in around October, September last year, I actually joined the People Participation team as a worker specifically for the disordered eating pathway work. And that's been my role ever since. The central purpose of my role is to really ensure that people with lived experience are given opportunities to draw on that experience to inform the work that we're doing within the transformation programme. And obviously with my own personal experience of eating disorders, that's where my focus really lies. So I guess my day-to-day job is kind of twofold. On the one hand, I'm drawing on my own lived experiences as a Hackney resident and service user, as someone who has lived with eating disorders for many, many years and used services, and I'm drawing on that experience to help sort of guide and inform the work that we're doing in East London to improve the provision of care and support for other people like me. But also a key part of my role is to make sure that I am bringing in other service users who also have lived experience so that they have an opportunity to share what they think needs to change in East London and to just draw on their own experiences around what has worked, what hasn't worked, where services are failing and where they need to do better. So co-production and involvement is an absolute integral part of what I do every day. The aspect of my work and of the transformation programme generally that really excites me has got to be co-production. I see that happening more and more in the Trust, and I just think it really makes a difference to the work that we're doing. I also know from first-hand experience the difference it can make to individual service users. So for me, having opportunities in the past to be actively involved in the co-production of work really had an impact on my own self-worth, how I made sense of my experiences, how I valued what I'd been through, and it really gave me a sense of empowerment and greater confidence in my own value and identity. And I see it having the same impact on the people that I work with now, and I just think that we have to value that. I think also we make better work when we actually work together as collaborators, when we stop seeing the people who use services just as users and ourselves as providers, but actually start to think more about people as partners, as collaborators, and to look for opportunities to work jointly so that together we can improve services for the betterment of everybody involved. Service users who are struggling with eating disorders in East London currently face a huge problem, which is that we don't have specialist dedicated services for East London. If we do, there's a very, very tiny pocket. So there's a huge gap there. And this means that people are struggling a lot of the time without really having the care and support that they need to keep them well. And the problem with eating disorders is they tend not to just get better on their own. People do need support, and without that support, people's difficulties tend to spiral out of control, become much more entrenched, and over time they become harder to treat. It's much more difficult to treat an eating disorder that has been left untreated for a long period of time. So this is one of the kind of key objectives of the transformation programme, is to address that gap and to really look at how can we better support people who are struggling in the community. I think also there's quite a sort of widespread lack of understanding and awareness about eating disorders and how best to support people, particularly in the community. I think all too often care and support is maybe left to specialist dedicated services, and for those of us in East London, those specialist services are currently provided by a different NHS trust outside of the boroughs. So it's a bit of a risk really to just say, well, let's leave the care and treatment to this completely different trust. We really want people to be getting the care and support they need in their local area as soon as possible. early intervention is absolutely key, particularly in the treatment of eating disorders. So these are some of the challenges we're facing, and they're big challenges, certainly for those of us who are engaged in trying to create something new. We're starting almost from scratch. But it's an exciting opportunity to really do something different and to make a difference to people who are struggling. So within the transformation programme, obviously we're trying to address some of these issues and to try and fill the gap. And one of the key things that we've been doing is to look at staff confidence and understanding around the topic of eating disorders. I think one of the kind of proudest pieces of work, I suppose, that I've done since I came into this role really has been to co-develop and deliver training specifically on eating disorders for ELFT staff. So far we've delivered that to staff within Hackney Enhanced Primary Care, Tower Hamlets Enhanced Primary Care. We've got training lined up for Newham Talking Therapies, peer support workers, all kinds of different teams across the Trust. And we've also been delivering the training to university support staff at the University of East London and Queen Mary University London. So really the aim of this training is to increase staff understanding and awareness of eating disorders, but also to support them and give them some skills they might need in order to support someone who's struggling in the community. In my own experience, I think a lot of staff, particularly working within primary care, can be quite nervous about how to have a conversation about eating disorders and a little bit unsure about how to broach that topic. So we really, really want to empower staff to be able to have that conversation with compassion and sensitivity. The other things that we've been working on within the transformation programme are developing some psychoeducation sessions for service users, and this has been co-produced with Experts by Experience, which I'm really excited about. And in fact will be co-delivered by those Experts by Experience as well. So again, this has been some really fantastic co-production work that's gone into that. And then we've also been developing some workshops for carers, because we know that people who struggle with eating disorders, a lot of the time, particularly when the services aren't there to support them, are being supported by loved ones at home. It might be family, friends, partners. And all too often those carers themselves need support, need guidance and information to help them support their loved ones. So we've been co-producing some workshops to really give those carers the support that they need. And ongoing, there's an awful lot that we need to address in East London around eating disorders, and so there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes as well in terms of trying to refine the care pathway, right from GPs all the way through to specialist services and inpatient care. And all sorts of kind of collaborative working that's been going on with our partners in Barnet, Enfield and Haringey who provide the inpatient services. So again, good co-production work going on there to try and sort out some of the issues that historically have meant people aren't getting the care that they need. So obviously we're focusing at the moment on psychoeducation for service users, education for staff and support for carers. So what we're trying to do really is to ensure that people who are struggling with eating disorders or the broad spectrum of disordered eating get the care and support they need at the earliest stage possible without having to wait until they are eligible for more sort of specialist intensive intervention. Because at the moment, unfortunately, the way the system is designed, people have to meet certain criteria in order to qualify, I guess, for certain services, and that really isn't the way it should be. People should be entitled to care no matter what their weight, no matter what sort of degree of physical severity they are experiencing in terms of their difficulties. So we really want to make sure that people are being supported by primary care staff, secondary care staff, carers if that's part of their support network, university staff. Because actually I think there can be a perception that you have to be a sort of specialist in eating disorders in order to treat eating disorders, and I just disagree. I think actually there's a lot that you can do even if you don't have specialist training, and that's what we're trying to empower people to be able to do. I have really ambitious hopes, I think, for the future of eating disorder care in East London. Ambitious but realistic, I hope. I'd love us to get to a point where we have a holistic, community-focused eating disorder service that can be accessed by people who are struggling regardless of their weight, regardless of how physically unwell they are, so that there aren't barriers or hoops they have to jump through in order to get care. I'd love this to be a kind of holistic focus on supporting people's mental health, so it involves OTs, arts therapies, talking therapy, dietetics, all kinds of different interventions that can support that person on their recovery journey. I'd love this to be a service that can be accessed freely by individuals without having to jump through referral hoops, and for us to be providing support to people at all stages of their recovery journey. Unfortunately, getting better from an eating disorder doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, difficult process. It takes time. And I think all too often people are kind of given short bursts of intervention and then left to get on with it themselves. And actually, we need help at different stages, and sometimes that help might take different forms. As for things like training, I'm really, really keen to deliver that as widely as possible, and I'm putting in my diary all kinds of dates with different ELF teams. So if anyone is interested in signing up for the disordered eating training that I provide, please just email me and get in touch, because I would love to come and deliver that training for you. I'm really passionate about how much a difference education can make, and how actually, if all of us view it as our own responsibility to become informed about how we can support people with eating disorders, and that will go a really long way to helping our local service users.